So that's a big view. Here's a slightly smaller view of a slightly smaller area. Scott Peterson has been writing articles about various organizations, local administrations and distant administrations of nonprofit corporations that have a board that runs them and don't necessarily go by their own policies. And here is his article about the new general manager of KZYX, Jeffrey Parker. I read that he sent the article off to the Anderson Valley Advertiser, and the editor told him to give Jeffrey Parker a chance. And he wrote back and copied it to me that's what they said about the last few people that he wrote about. Give them a chance, give them 6 months, give them a year, and then look what they did with it. They've had five general managers in the last 2 years at KZYX. Those that weren't run off ran away screaming for good reason. Yes, Man is the name of this article by Scott Peterson. And I don't know whether it's going to be in the Anderson Valley Advertiser or not, but it's here, and take it with whatever sized grain of salt you'd like to take it with. It's his work, and I'm reading it aloud on the radio because that's what I do. Scott Peterson wrote, KZYX's new general manager came here all the way from mainland China. That's Jeffrey Parker. According to his resume, he went there as a journalist for United Press International in 1990 and returned as a publisher with ILX Media Group in 2016. If true, that's a real hat trick, since foreign-owned media haven't been allowed in mainland China since the 1948 Chinese Revolution. Wire Service articles with Parker's byline appear several times during that era, all of them approved by Chinese government officials, many of them steering Western readers into believing Parker's resume, but none of them bearing the name of China's only Nobel Prize-winning journalist, Liu Xiaobao, a man imprisoned by Chinese officials for saying something they didn't like, whose name is forbidden to utter inside mainland China today. Parker never wrote about Xiaobao, but Xiaobao wrote about Parker once. The quote was given around 2008 in a publication titled The Fog of Censorship, Media Control in China, right before Xiaobao was arrested. He contested Parker's claim as nothing more than a crazy story inspired by the illusion of a looming media empire. Statements like that are exactly what Xiaobao went to prison for, while Parker's, quote, crazy story is precisely what kept him in business. In a KZYX press release, Parker claims to have co-founded an independent news media company in China, something that supposedly overcame prohibitions on foreign-owned news media in both China and India, thereby contradicting what Xiaobao got busted for, and promoting Chinese Communist Party propaganda. Xiaobao's resume is studded with awards and honors, 15 in all, while Parker's resume shows none. The media empire Xiaobao spoke of would have included ILX Media Group. Its other co-founder was a fellow named Grant J. Prigg from Greensboro, North Carolina. Their flagship publication was Ophthalmology Times, something that at a circulation of 50,000 Parker claimed to have been read by most eye doctors in India and China. But according to the International Council of Ophthalmology, there are nearly 40 million eye doctors in those countries, leaving either the ICO's or Parker's counting skills in question. But in 2012, Parker made the mistake of blaming it all on his Chinese hosts, telling an online publication, China is not big in measurement. In general, research and self-evaluation and monitoring are not very mature. Prigg pulled out of ILX right after that, and Parker pulled ILX out of China, relocating it to the Cayman Islands. The only photo I could find was taken in December of 2004 and appears on Flickr. Another component was a California corporation called Vision in Practice, based at 425 Denton Way in Santa Rosa, which kind of looks like a residence. According to state records, it was founded in November of 2012 as a charity. But on August 8, 2016, the IRS revoked its nonprofit charter over failure to file a public Form 990 for 3 years running. Not that Parker had filed too few of them. He didn't file any of them. Parker's resume reveals something important about him. From 1984 to 1992, he claims to have been a foreign correspondent for United Press International. In 1991, he was quoted delivering practically word for word a message from the Chinese propaganda office. By 2000, Parker had risen to the position of media content chief for regions including China, but with nothing besides government-approved content. According to Human Rights Watch in China, those who even spoke with foreign journalists were punished after 1997 and continuously thereafter. Yet Parker miraculously managed to keep his job until 2002. After that, he started publishing healthcare zines for Chinese ophthalmologists, which must have been pretty simple since nobody was allowed to speak with him. And he held on to that job for 13 years, the last 3 while it was headquartered in the Cayman Islands. I first interviewed Mr. Parker on the telephone in mid-November for about an hour. He told me about having no expectations going into China as a reporter, only curiosity. He had arrived just a few months after the uprising at Tiananmen Square and was shocked at the number of executions thereafter, numbering somewhere in the thousands. My response was that figure, if true, was completely underreported here in the United States. Parker's reply was that it was reported, but couldn't point to a single article that he'd written about it. The only thing I could find was a footnote for something titled, "Doctors Hold Risky Forum on Torture in China," but nothing whatsoever on post-protest executions. Parker's account of his assignment was extraordinary. These were the early days of the Internet, so he discovered a way to splice his computer into a regular old telephone line, something that 1.5 billion Chinese hadn't figured out. That's how he filed his stories. Interviewing subjects was challenging for a while because Chinese agents were tailing him all the time, so he shook them by riding a bicycle, suggesting that neither anybody else in China had one or that nobody else could keep up with him, which at age 30 would be quite an achievement in itself. Yet 0 stories about post-protest Chinese executions seemed to be at his disposal today. When I asked, he told me that he'd somehow lost them all. Parker recalled being pulled in for a friendly warning or 2 from Chinese officials, but nothing more. Others weren't so lucky. Sky News reporter Mark Stone was arrested during a live broadcast in 2013 for merely mentioning the 1989 Tiananmen Square protest. Parker somehow got away with it, probably because he used it as a backdrop for the so-called progress in China. One of his articles used it to feature the opening of a Hard Rock Cafe. Another was to highlight a major road project. But none of them mention any post-protest executions, nor do they criticize Chinese officials. By and large, all of Parker's articles that I could find look like puff pieces for the most repressive regime on earth. Parker was reluctant to talk about the situation at KZYX, partly because he didn't know much about it, and partly because he hadn't been offered a position yet. But he did chime in about the importance of keeping it around, something I completely agreed with. So I agreed to continue with the second half of our interview around the first of the year, after he'd gotten his feet wet. In the spirit of openness, something appreciated in these parts, I thought that sharing the first half of this article would be better for everyone. It would also let Mr. Parker know that people have his number here, lest he do in Mendocino as he's done elsewhere. It also gives him some wiggle room to acknowledge past mistakes and maybe atone for them. Closing our first interview, I tried to be very straight with Parker. Hiring a journalist as the new GM, KZYX could go one of 2 directions, either employing the value creation, ethics, and leadership he's preached, or the whitewashing he's practiced. Either way, it'd be nice to know which way he'll go before our second interview, ideally in a straight-talking article of his own, especially since he's a journalist